Hello, happy new year, and welcome to 2025. So, this is the very first live stream in the new year, and welcome for anyone who's joining in live or who's joining in for the replay. This is going to be quite a juicy one because, as per usual, as I've been doing over the past few years already, I'm going to go through the numerology of this entire year ahead, and we're also going to see how the numerology of last year kind of has to do with this one as well. And I'll do a few more like general predictions, let's put it that way, not necessarily like more on a personal level, but really for like the world or worldly predictions. Now, I have no idea what's going on with the live stream here. So I'm going to pop up another window while people are tuning in and see if people are able to comment when I go to my actual channel. So welcome for anyone who's joining right now. Okay. That's great. If you want to comment in the chat, you can. And if you're watching this in replay, you can obviously comment in the comment sections. I'm also going to check the audio quality while we're at it. There were a few technical difficulties. Like this is the third try as per usual. And I think it could very well have to do with us still being a little bit in that Mercury retrograde shadow energy for I think it's January 5th, or between 2nd January 5th, depending on who, obviously. So let's just see how this is going on. I just want to check here. I hope you're having a wonderful first day or second day, depending on where you are. Oh gosh, what's going on here? Okay, I think the audio is better now. Oh gosh. Okay. I have no idea. Honestly, this is so distracting. That's why I hate, I have this Rode microphone. I love it. But whenever I try to pull up something live on the computer, it messes up the audio for whatever reason. So I'm going to have to either look at the live chat somehow differently. Yeah, because I can't look at it from my main screen or not. Okay, anyhow, either way, we got to move on. Like these are just technical issues. They're not super surprising. So, you guys, yes, welcome to anyone who's joining right now. Hope you're having a wonderful time wherever you are. I hope you had a wonderful first day, the very first day to 2025. A new energy obviously always feels so amazing and so relieving. And we are all entering, no matter what year it is, obviously, we're all entering a new year with hopes and expectations and possibly New Year's resolutions and manifestations and whatever it is that you want to have come true and come to fruition in your own personal life. And so the first few days, the first few weeks, possibly even the first month, always feels like so hopeful and just so exciting, doesn't it? I mean, at least I know for me personally, and also for other people, it may do that. But it also depends on how you start your year too. So if you're starting a year maybe with too much drama or just something happened in your personal life that can also put a bummer on it. And I do want to point this out. It doesn't necessarily mean that if you started off the new year or the first week of the new year in a very strange way, let's just say you broke up with your partner or something different happened. Like, I don't even want to say like a death in a family, but something like that. It's not necessarily going to define the energy of the year ahead. But it could very well define like the first few weeks or months of that. And then so you just want to be aware of that too. Now, of course, while I'm recording this, my dog has to chew on one of her favorite toys. So hopefully that doesn't make it into the microphone. It's always so funny. Hey, can you stop that? Come on. It's always so funny how they try to gain your attention in that way. I also want to point out that maybe your pets are needier than usual. Obviously, there's a lot going on, and pets, animals, small children too. Those type of beings and want to say creatures, but those type of beings would usually be more sensitive to energy in general. So I'm personally noticing it with pets. Now, before we go into the numerology of this year, there's a numerology to each year, and this numerology goes in 9 cycles. I don't know if you guys are still in the chat or not. If you are, I can't read any new replies. I'm just going to point that out too. So if there's anything happening there, I can't read them. So every numerology comes in 9 cycles. And so right now we are entering the 2025, which has a numerology of 9. That's the overarching theme, but also the numerology of 7. And the last time we had this was in 2016, which was 9 years ago. Before that, 2007. And the next time we're going to have this is in 2034. Last year, which was 2024, 2034 is when. So last year, which was 2024, we had the number of 8, but also the number of 6. And the next time that's going to come around is going to be in 2033. Hi to Julie, nice to see you. So I'm hoping this is working somehow. And so what we just went through in 2024 was the number 8, but also the theme of the 6. And the 8 is governed by the planet of Saturn. Saturn has to do with struggle energy. And I feel a lot of this, not everyone, but a lot of us have been noticing this to a certain degree, to a certain extent in their lives. And if you can just look back onto this entire year, I'm sure there were beautiful moments. I know in my own personal life, yes, absolutely, amazing moments, but the overall energy, very struggly to get through, very hard to work through. And with the number 6 connotation, and the way that comes about is like 2 + 2 + 4, that's 8. But then the 20, if you just take the 24, and this is going to be important for every single year, by the way, that's 2 + 4 is 6. So the way you write things, remember when you were in school or even at work back in the days where people were still writing the dates by hand, or even if you write it on a computer, you would write, okay, so 1/1/25 or 1/1/24. And so because it is abbreviated in that way, the underlying theme, which is, I want to say, is equally important as the overarching numerology, the underlying one was 6. 6 has a lot to do with relationships, with love. I mean, 6 is literally the lover's card. If you go to the traditional tarot, the 6 is a lover's card. But it also has to do with friendships, with relationships, with healing, with the arts, with those type of things. Now, for me, from our own personal life, just to discuss the numerology of the last year, to give you an idea of this coming year, the way this all manifested was when I visited certain type of places, which those places in and of itself hold an energy in and of itself. If you're familiar with astrocartography, there are certain lines that go through certain places. They're going to look different for each and every one of us, unless you're an identical twin, then that's a little bit different. But when I visited places that had a very more fortunate lines, for me, for example, I had these beautiful experiences with other people. Nicaragua was an example of that. And I specifically noticed that because before that, I had taken a trip somewhere else where it was harder to make friends, let's put it that way. But when I was in Central America, which is Central America in general, it's not hard to make friends just because of the culture in and of itself. You make these loving friendships or relationships, you meet these people on another level. And I had a really good time there, but there was still this struggle energy in terms of pushing that forward into the future. So they weren't necessarily as long lasting as they should have been. Or you were thinking about, okay, so I thought this person was this, but at the end of the day, they weren't necessarily like that. They were a little bit different. And I know you have that for whenever you enter a new friendship or a new whatever, relationship with a person, not from a romantic level, by the way, but whenever you enter that, I know you always have that period where you think the person is different than from usual. But I felt for the year that we had just passed in my own personal life, those type of things, because of that Saturn energy, the 6 energy that was trying to push through, that is more governed by Venus, was kind of a little bit tainted by that Saturn energy. Let's put it that way. And maybe you've noticed that yourself as well. So we have Julie, we have GR, we have Quantum Fishbowl, we have D, we have J Mata. Jay is saying, last year was challenging, but I moved out of my house, been there since 1989, which was in toxic area physically and etherically. Congratulations. The year to move from just the overall energy. And of course, in your own personal life, you could have very well moved last year like you did, but the year to move would be this year. And it would have also been in 2023. That would have been when you would have seen the most moves in general. Let's put it that way. Now, of course, I have moved in completely different. Like I moved in 2022. I've moved in 2021. I moved in 20. So I've also moved outside of these pivotal years. But 2025 has the connotation of movement, and so did 2023. So if you go back to 2023, that had the underlying theme of 5, and then the main numerology was 7. And 7 is governed by Neptune, which Neptune, translated over to Greek, is Poseidon, by the way. Neptune is influencing us this year in 2025 as well. So we're getting out of this Saturn energy, the struggle energy. And if you are an 8 number anyhow, let's just say you were born on the 8th, on the 17th, on the 26th. Those are people with 8 number dates. You might have really felt an 8 year. I know because I'm a 1 number, I feel the 1 years the most. So for me, 2017 was really great, and the next 1 year that we're going to enter, like the 1 or the 10 year that we're going to enter, is going to be right after this one in 2026. So you would just personally have to determine for yourself. There's just so much that goes into numerology. It's crazy. You could probably make like 4 different chapters on it of like 4 hours each, but you get the point. And so if your numerology is 9, let's say you were born on the 9th, on the 18th, on the 27th, and so on, this year is going to have a little bit more influence on you than for, a different person who has a different day number numerology too. That's just on the side. So what numerology does the 9 and also the 7.5. So the 9 comes from the 2 plus 2 plus 5. That equals 9. That's the overarching theme. But because 2 plus 5 equals 7, and those are the last 2 digits, we're also having this Neptunian, the 7 influence into this year. The 9, I hate to say it because it's a warlike energy. The 9 is Mars. And if you're still following, just pop something in the chat or whatever, because at this point, I'm looking at 2 different screens. I'm looking here on my phone and I'm looking here to record. It's just been a really confusing way to set this up for today. But the 9, let's just go into the numerology of the 9 before we head over to the 7, which we cannot forget the 7. By the way, a lot of people forget that there's the 7 connotation to it. And it's been that way. If you go back to like 2007, it was the same. 2016, the same. Now, the way the astrology is, the way the planets are, it's a bit different. Like in 2007, we were almost entering Pluto and Capricorn. That happened in 2008. So we're just coming out of that. From my understanding, we just entered Pluto in Aquarius, if I'm not mistaken, or something else. So the energy, the overall energy is obviously not going to be the same that it was 9 years ago, but the numerology is a bit similar. And so that's important to note as well. And in 2007, for example, you have more of those prime numbers, the 2 prime numbers right next to each other, whereas in 2016, that wasn't the case. And right now, that's not the case either in 2025. So there's a few slight differences to it. But the 9 numerology the 9 is governed by Mars. I'm just going to read something from up here. So I pulled up a whole bunch of different notes and sites and whatnots. So overall, the numerology 9, what is being said on the 9 is it's represented by the planet Mars. It's also considered to be a divine number because it's the highest number there. So if you go by prime numbers 1 through 9, the 9 is the last one, and then the next cycle starts again. So the next cycle would be 1, which is the year that we go after that, 2026, which is the year I'm a little bit looking forward to, but I'm not afraid of 2025 either. The number 9 is considered as the number of literally everything. Therefore, the number 9 is also the shadow number of the number 0. So number 0 is a number of nothing, and the number 9 is the number of everything. Everything is nothing, nothing's everything. You can play around with that too. But basically, the number 9 has a lot to do with justice, integrity, honor. I'm going to go to a different definition that might resonate more with the year ahead. So it has a lot to do with humanitarianism. The 9 represents selflessness, compassion, and patience. 9s also love happy endings and are purposeful in their pursuit of a result. So this might be a great year. If you really want to pursue something, this is going to be the year you're probably going to see it through. It contains forces of all the other numbers, has a certain spiritual intuition. The spiritual intuition comes really through in the number 7, by the way. If you take 9, because 9, there's 2 sides to a number. If you take 9 from the positive side, it has a lot to do with being compassionate and non-judgmental, which is huge because the 8 had a lot to do with justice, seeking justice, legal matters, those type of things. And so coming out of that energy into the 9, where it's, oh, we're not judging as much, or we're more willing to listen to you or the circumstances, it's a bit of a different energy. But on the negative side, 9s can also represent being defensive, being careless, and emotional. Overall, a 9 represents the sympatheticness and altruistic features of people or just the world in general, which that is great. However, because it is governed by Mars, Mars is what? Traditionally, Mars stands for war. So let me see here where I got my Mars tab open, the way I just put them up here. It's even confusing me, you people. Okay, so I put up Mars in the 6th house, all of that. Okay, so Mars, first of all, if you're an Aries, you might feel this year more than anything because Aries is governed by Mars. So if you have Aries somewhere in your chart, meaning it's in your sun, your rising, your moon, or if you have Mars in Aries, you might feel this way more than ever before. Just forewarning you. And what you really want to look at, if you're really into this, is where your Mars falls to give you an idea of the struggles that you could be facing in this Mars governed year ahead. For me personally, not to become, too much into my own chart, but my Mars is in Cancer. So for me, some people say, oh, it's not favorable, it's not fortunate, but I'm like, it's okay. It's kind of neutral for me. It works with the other ways that the chart is set up. So I don't have Aries and Mars. I also don't have Sagittarius and Mars. I don't have these fiery signs in Mars, but it's actually in a sign that works okay. You also want to look at in which house it falls. Okay, so if your Mars falls in the 12th house, that can be a little bit less favorable than when it falls into the other houses. Now with Mars, just look at this here real quick. Mars typically represents okay, I'm going to have to put that. Mars. Okay, so Mars represents war, coldness, desertedness. So it can be a little bit isolating on the negative side. But at the same time, when you look at Mars and what it also represents, so that's like more the imbalanced side. When it's more balanced, it represents energy and action and really marching forward in that fiery energy. So I feel for this year that we're particularly in, the air signs and the fire signs are going to benefit a little bit more than the earth and the water signs. So the earth and the water signs were the ones who would have been a little bit more in a flow with 2024. This year, the fire signs for sure, but also the air signs are going to feel a little bit more driven. And if you have, and this is not even necessarily if you have it like in your sun or rising or whatever, but like in any of those major constellations, you're going to take a seat back in that sense. You're going to have a little bit more of a relaxed time, but you may not feel as driven as air and fire in this upcoming year. Now, once again, it depends on your own personal things. You would have to look that up yourself. So I'm not seeing anything here. If you just pop a comment somewhere in that chat, that would be helpful because I don't see anything. So what we're basically in right now is we're in this fiery energy of Mars. We're in energy action. We're in desire. Yeah, not seeing anything. I hope you guys see the replay. And that is basically what the main overarching numerology represents. Now, if you go, let me just look at my notes here. So we had fire, air, earth, and Mars. Yeah. Okay. So if you go on a more personal level, it really depends on your own personal chart. It really depends on where your Mars is in. It really depends on how the number 9 works for your own life, how it's going to play out. But this is just to give you an idea. Now, on a world level, what is also happening is we had the wars that kind of kicked off. We had the entire Ukraine and Russia war in 2022. And then we also had the entire Middle East war in end of 2023 until now. So unfortunately, because Mars is governing this entire year ahead, it does not appear to be a peacemaker type of year. Let's put it that way. That's more on a worldly level. On a personal level, this can look very different for you. But I want to just say, for the year to come, at least, I'm not really seeing much of peacemaking with any of the wars that are going on right now. And if you go back to my predictions that I made, I had these 3 videos on Palestine, on Israel, and all of that. So they're from October and November 2023, and you can easily look them up on this channel after. But I had these 3 videos that were basically talking about how we're the entire war, especially the Middle East war, the war in Gaza and everything, how that's just going to drag on, but how the media in and of itself is just going to stop reporting on it unless something major happens again. But for most of the world, it's not like it's forgotten. It's just that people are moving on. They're dealing with their own struggles. Like last year was that struggle energy and everything. So they're dealing with their own struggles, their own like material success or other types of success that they wanted to achieve in 2024. And so when you talk to people who are still in that area, I just talked to my friend in Israel, and I have friends all over. I have friends in Egypt. I have a friend from Palestine. I have my Israeli friends. So do not come at me being like, oh, you're just a Jewish promoter or whatever. No, I have friends all over. I'm a very open-minded person. But I talked to my Israeli friend in particular, and this is only a few months ago, and she was just saying, yeah, it's similar to how this entire Ukraine conflict was. Like people have completely forgotten about whatever is happening here. It's impacting both sides still, not just one side, although the media makes it seem it's just impacting one side. They go to bomb shelters, like she's in the north of Israel. They're going to bomb shelters regularly. She's trying to bring up a child in that situation. It's obviously not ideal. People are leaving it behind. If they have more than one passport, they're leaving the country, which you can't blame them for it. But obviously, it's completely destroying the economies around that area. Economies in Greece, if they're all moving there with more money, it's really not a good situation. Or they're going to other EU, like if they have an EU citizen, if there's going to those other things. So in short, it's really not favorable at all. And so what we're seeing with this entire Mars energy that's being amplified in this year ahead is it's probably not going to be a peacemaking year. And I also feel around the summer or so, you might see more action in like that Syria, Lebanon area, whatever that's going to be. I don't know, but I feel that energy is just going to amplify even more in that area. So it could very well be that Iran's going to be involved even more than they already are. But I just feel for some reason, Syria and Lebanon, there's something going to happen over there on a major level. So much to that. Now, we also have the energy of the 7. And I'm just going to have to just again see if it's actually recording. Okay. So the energy of the 7 is governed by Neptune, and Neptune is putting Neptune and Mars together is really, really interesting because Neptune is kind of like that dreamy, everything's possible, but also illusion type of situation that almost doesn't really fit into Mars. And so for people, me as an example, I love to visit, if you're into astrocartography, I love to visit my Neptune line because when you're already so much into astral traveling or shamanic journeying or just the type of healing work that I do, the Neptune line really amplifies the psychic abilities that you already have. And it's so much easier to tap into your own intuition, to tap into your own psychic insight, to do all these things that are a little bit harder in other areas of the world, let's put it that way. And so that is really the Neptune energy. And so the Neptunian energy can work really nicely because it brings the spiritual component into everything. It's not just, we're not just going to be at war or angry at each other in the year ahead. No. But it brings this really nice underlying creativity, productivity. If you're an artist, if you do anything creative, let's say you're painting or singing or anything of that, you might find a lot of inspiration on your own personal level with the 7 energy that's coming together with the 9 energy. And 9 is obviously, this infinite, everything comes together, but the 7 is a spiritual component to that. So if you go to 2023, for me personally, we had that underlying 5 energy, which is all about travel and communication. And then the 7 was that overlying, this is the year number energy. For me, 2023 was one of the most spiritual years I've ever had. I visited one spiritual site after another. That's the very first time I went to the Middle East and then returned to the Middle East, returned to these really ancient Greek sites, like was really drawn to a lot of those areas. And so for me, that's kind of how it played out. And I was more drawn to it than in the year 2024. I do want to point that out too. So we're having another go at the spiritual side of things with this year because of that underlying Neptunian energy, the underlying 7 energy. And bringing that together with Mars is actually quite interesting because Mars on the positive side is going to get you going, is going to get you moving. You're going to be able to make that action. And then the 7 brings this component of a little bit of travel too, like the 7 card in the tarot is the Chariot, which has to do with travel, but it's not always as clear where you're going. I do want to say that too. So it could be a year for relocation. It could be a year to find someone like on a personal level. It could be a year if you're trying to find love or whatever. You're trying to manifest that in the year ahead. Now, unfortunately, with Mars and finding love, unless it's really meant to be, or unless it's like this really deeper soulmate connection or whatever. And if you're already in a relationship, this might not necessarily apply to you. But for some people, this might play out and you're trying to make it work and work and work. And at the end of the day, it's not going to work. Like you're trying to power through it with that Mars energy. But Mars and Venus, or the Mars and the lover's energy, they don't necessarily go together that well. So you might notice that, okay, you're just trying to make something work, like you're trying to make a relationship work that wasn't really meant to work out on that level anyhow. And in that case, you just kind of have to let it go. I think we all have to cut our losses at one point and be like, okay, so this is something I thought was different than it was anyhow. And I know this is happening, especially like today already. It's happening for some people who are like, I'm not going to compromise my life anymore. This is just not necessarily working with the person I'm with. So we might see that in the coming year, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. So with that 7 component, it brings in a very nice spiritual energy. It stands for insight, for seeking deeper meaning in everything, and having profound thoughts within your mind, within your heart, within your intuition. But also keep in mind the shadow side of Neptune is that disillusionment. And maybe you're putting someone or something more on a pedestal than you should have. But you would have seen that more in 2023 than in this year. However, it is kind of the underlying number of this year. Let's put it that way. So I would say the 7 is more in a feminine energy, whereas the 9 for sure is more in that masculine energy. So once again, we're trying to find balance between both in the year ahead. And this is overall just going to be a very interesting one. So in short, you could have way more energy depending on where Mars is in your chart and whether you're an air or fire sign or the earth and water sign. You could have way more energy already. You could be really feeling this on the first day already. A lot of people are just ready to like, okay, that's gone, that's dropped. Now we're marching forward into this. But it could also be in a way that's a bit too much. It's a bit like, okay, you still have to wait. There are still some components that need to fall into place. And Mars and fire, you had a lot of cases here where, for example, we had this subway case here in New York City. And that happened a few days ago. That was technically still in 2024. But because the closer we get to the actual year, the more we're already in that energy, let's put it that way. So because it was kind of like that fluid transfer over period, it's not surprising that the setting the woman on fire in a subway became this huge theme that was closing out the year, at least here where I am, because Mars and fire, that would be it. And so if we're seeing more and more of these wildfires, which we all know they're not necessarily natural at this point, right? But if you're seeing more of that in this upcoming year, Mars would be very supportive of the fire energy. So you need to pay attention to that too, because Mars and fire absolutely go together. Now, if, like I said, if you're earth and water, you might feel extremely exhausted. You might feel like you want to take a step back, and that's perfectly fine too. So it's going to play out differently for different types of people. Let's put it that way. I didn't know anything about the subway thing. Yeah, it was, I mean, I'm here. It was all over the news. So this year, I intend to focus more on my overall health, mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. So you're going to tap more into that 7 energy. And I actually intend to do the same. Like for me, usually the second number, so not necessarily the overarching theme, but the second number is a little bit more true. And so we'll see how that plays out in this upcoming year. I don't know. It's always so hard to like try to sum up the 365 days just with one motto. And I feel the past few minutes have probably given you several different mottos. Um, so also, I'm kind of convinced that New York City, I don't know if anyone has ever done like the astrocartography on this city in particular, but I'm kind of convinced that it either lies on a Mars or a Pluto line, like in the overall, if you just look at a chart somewhere in the US or anything, if you just look at a location chart, I'm kind of convinced that it lies on either a Mars or a Pluto line, because I've gotten a lot of comments from people over the past few years that whenever they're here, they feel extremely angry and this and that. And for me personally, from my own personal chart, I'm very close to my moon, and I'm also very close to my sun line, which is really, really nice. So it feels pretty much like home. I feel very much in my element too. But for people who already have a very strong Mars in their chart, or who maybe even visit, and this is their Mars line or their Pluto line, you're going to have a really bad experience in New York City. And so it's not surprising when I see comments like that, because I've just been here for so long, like 15 plus years. It just works. And that doesn't come out of nowhere. But I do understand the confusion, because I have visited my own Pluto line too. And that was in Texas, by the way. And I felt the same. People were kind of in my face, getting at me, those type of things. I like New York City. People were very nice to me there. Yeah. So you have to just look up your own line and see which one it falls on. It could be on a Venus line or something. You never know. But obviously, you can't just over summarize everything like that either. It's just the energies of a place play into role. Your own personal experience with the place plays into role. And these could be some explanations to it. Let's put it that way. And also, what I've personally noticed, if you just look at the news specifically here, like we had this entire New Orleans thing happening, where I drove into a crowd, did this and that, and then also some stabbings here in New York City. That is the Mars energy. That is the confrontational energy. And so it's also not surprising that we're starting off this year like that. And, people are angry. People who are angry, it's going to play out like people are already in that anger. That Mars energy is really going to hype it up in that way. And I know not every single thing that's mentioned in the news is true, but it's not surprising that we started the year off like that. So that's just so that is kind of like the Mars energy that I was discussing in the past few minutes. This is really, okay, being at war, not necessarily being a peacemaking. And now I personally have received more and more troll comments, which they're all filtered out, by the way. I'm not allowing any troll comments on my channel anymore. But I have received more over these past few days. And I do feel that strongly has to do with this entire Mars combative energy. And it wasn't even like productive comments. Like sometimes you have troll comments that are like sentences long and says, I don't agree with you because of this and this and that. Like those type of comments are different. But it's literally just these random troll comments that make zero sense, where I'm just like, yeah, this is the Mars 9 energy that we're dealing with right now. And it's just not going to impact me. I'm not going to have it impact me at all. Like I've been dealing with this ever since I had YouTube. That's 2019 and on. Not necessarily this channel, because the old channel was taken down, but I am just not having this affect me anymore on any level. And so you personally might be noticing that too. If you notice it more with your pets, if you notice it more with your children, that, they're kind of more in that, like getting and having a go at each other. That is because we're just getting settled into this energy. So Susie's saying, I'm a 9. You're going to feel this year more because you're a 9. If your day number is a 9, not your life path number, you're going to be feeling this more. And you might feel more in your element because it's a 9 year. For me, I know whenever I'm in my number year, which is going to be the year after this one, I'm way more in my element than in the other ones. But no matter what, I mean, everything comes in 9 cycles. So obviously we have to deal with, yeah, every year is going to impact us on a certain level. So we have to deal with it no matter what, right? We can't just skip a year, go to sleep for a year or whatever. And so this is actually, I think it's more favorable than the 8-year for a lot of people. Unless you already are a Saturnistic 8, meaning you were born on an 8 day somehow, you may have dealt with the 8 a little bit better than other people. But I feel the 9 energy is probably going to be more favorable, and together with that underlying 7 energy. So let me see what else. Oh, another thing. If you had your Saturn, this is actually really important. If you had your Saturn return during a year that Saturn governs, meaning an 8-year, and I know at least 2 people who had a Saturn return last year, and a Saturn return comes around twice. So you have your first Saturn return from like 27-ish to 29, 30, 31. It depends on when, but between 27 and 30 or 31, that's your first Saturn return. You can look it up in your own chart, by the way. And then your second one is going to be around 27 to 29 years after that. So if you are in your mid 50s right now, you're going through your second Saturn return. And last year could have impacted you way more than any other person, than people who weren't going through their Saturn returns. Let's put it that way. So my one friend who was going through her first Saturn return last year, and she's still in it, the way that manifested is, she was trying to, okay, so this is the thing with moving, and last year she was trying to move. She's actually trying to move away from New York City to a different country, was all excited about it. And she was moving to a country that already has a very strong Neptunian energy, meaning it's drawing people in, it's fascinating people, but there's also this component of disillusionment, being like smack hit in the face once you're there, and once you're settled in energy, being like, oh, this is not really what I thought it was. That's the typical Neptunian energy. And so she was relocating over there, had even learned the language of that country, like 5 months beforehand, even though you don't have to. I mean, it was like a kind of like an expat place where people also speak a lot of English and everything. But my point is, she was really, really excited for this new start. And from the depth of my heart, I really wished and hoped she could have made it work somehow. But I kind of liken it to my own experience when I wanted to make it work in Australia and it just didn't work. Let's put it that way. So she kind of had like that similar experience where after a few months, she only stayed for 2 months total, by the way. But after like a few months, or after like 6 weeks or so, things just kind of transpired, being like, oh, now my living situation is being ripped away from my feet. So I feel completely ungrounded. And, you're like miles away, like this is like across the ocean, like on a different continent. You're miles away. You're ripped away from your family, from friends, from all of this. You're in your Saturn return. It's a Saturn return year. And so she's pretty much just been on the road ever since. Hasn't really, I mean, it's strange, like going through a Saturn return in a Saturn year. It wasn't working in her favor. Let's put it that way. It just brought out a whole bunch of uncertainty and this and that. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but you could have felt it more last year. And so that's kind of how, like when I went through my Saturn return, I don't think it was necessarily a Saturn year that it happened. Let's put it that way. So I guess I was already lucky in that sense. But if you're going through that right now, just be aware of that. We literally just came out of it, but still. Okay, so wow, that was how many minutes? Already half an hour in, 40 minutes, almost 40 minutes in. I'm going to look on my phone here because I can't see anything else. Yeah, and so that's what I had to say about the numerology, about the energy ahead, and I don't think we're going to have world peace in the areas that are currently affected. Let's put it that way. So if you're looking at Israel, the Gaza Strip, Iran, those type of, like, that is just in such an iffy situation. There's a lot of Martian energy, like Mars type of energy, war energy in those areas. Anyhow, in addition to a little bit of that Neptunian energy too. So it's just not, I don't think it's going to work in favor in those areas if it is affecting you and impacting you to a certain extent. That's just what I wanted to say ahead. And I also think Lebanon, Syria, something's going to blow up in that area, maybe around summer, maybe before, maybe not, maybe hopefully not at all. But I feel for the trajectory that we're currently on, those would probably be the areas that are going to be impacted to a certain degree. I don't know if Dubai is ever going to be impacted, by the way. Dubai always seems to be a bit of that stable middle thing, and Oman's never drawn into anything either. So that's just something on the side. But we never know. Like everything goes in the year ahead. Okay, so I think that's what I wanted to say on numerology and whatever's ahead. A little bit of astrocartography, which I want to make a different video on astrocartography and how it resonates and how it doesn't necessarily resonate entirely, as per usual. But yeah, okay. What else is going on in the world? Let me see. Let me look at my notes here on the screen. I feel I had a few other things. Oh, right. With the number 9, it could also be a bit of introspection, need for self-reflection, solitude, and you might be feeling that more in the first few months. But so right now, January through March, once we hit March and once we really hit that Aries energy, because Mars governs Aries, it's going to be more about marching forward. Also, March is going to have the 2 eclipses, the 2 first ones, and the ones after are going to be in September, if I'm not mistaken. So what we're going to have in March is the eclipse season. It's mad. The past few have been absolute madness. You know, if you look 1 year ago, April, absolute freaking madness. And the one in October, we had like all the hurricanes around there, right? So we're, in addition to the eclipses, we're going to have the Mercury retrograde in March as well. So March, if you're planning on huge changes in your life, let's just say moving or signing something, whatever, or signing leases or contracts or whatever, or even marrying, you know, if you're trying to marry during that time, if you can, I would try to put it off, or do it before like February, or do it April, like April 9th and later than that, because that's when we're out of the Mercury retrograde. Well, when are we really out of the shadow? I think the retrograde ends April 5th, and then there's still that shadow period, but it's still better than the actual retrograde. So anyhow, because it's like March 14th to April 5th, if I'm not mistaken. I have to look those dates up again. But basically, March is going to be, it could very well be chaotic, because March, even though it's a little bit in Pisces, but at the end of it, we're going to hit that Aries and the actual new year and this and that. It could be a little bit of a recipe for disaster if you're trying to change something majorly. So if you can push it off, I would push it off, unless this is very much pre-planned, far, far in advance. And it's just, you know, if you want to make your life easier, just kind of try to avoid that specific area of this year. But I do feel very strongly we're going to have this hermity energy, meaning like that introspection, solitude, need for self-reflection, finding inner wisdom, looking for spiritual guidance, all of that. We're going to have that on a stronger level now through March, probably possibly like mid-March or so. So it can also lead to enlightenment on several different levels. Okay. I don't know if people are still participating or not. I'm just going with the flow here, but I hope that helps someone, even if you're watching this in the replay. Obviously, this is meant for you too. Okay. Well, I'm noticing a lot of pop-ups when I'm playing it on my phone. I don't know if you're seeing that on your end too. It's a little bit distracting. Put this down, put this up again so I can see the actual chat. Yeah. Okay. Now, what else can we talk about? Yeah, so I would say just keep the first few weeks light. Try to avoid drama, because the first few weeks can kind of put an imprint on the year that's to come. But obviously, if something happens in the first 3 weeks, it's not in your control. There's nothing you can do about it. But just keep that in mind too. Okay, so a lot of New Agers are promoting like solar flares and solar flashes again. I just came across this one channel that was doing it. Oh, it was out of control from like the Christmas period to New Year's Eve or something. Whenever that's done, it's very clearly man-made. I think people who follow this channel at this point, you know, all these solar flares, solar flashes, it's part of the Schumann resonance technology that they're using. It has nothing to do with this is the actual vibration of the planet or the people, but it's just part of this entire matrix technology that they're using, and that is invisible. And to us, it just seems like a form of magic or a form of supernatural, but it's not. It's just this advanced military tech that they're using. And so it's just there to take all of the feels like the ion or magnesium, like take all of these minerals out of your body. And when you take minerals out of a person's body through whatever tech they do it, when you radiate the crap out of a person, which happens with Wi-Fi, with EMF, with all of that. And so whatever tech they're using, it does that on yet another level. And the solar flashes and solar flares are a part of that. And so when this happens, you're going to have more migraines very clearly. You're going to feel more ungrounded. You're going to feel more, woozy and this and that. And these are all like the New Age deception symptoms that a lot of these New Agers are pushing. Because I don't know. I mean, maybe they don't see it, or they're working with certain entities that are giving them this false advice, or they don't want to see it. They want to put you onto this 5D timeline that just doesn't even really exist. But what it's doing is it's just radiating you with all of the tech that a normal person is not going to have access to it unless you're part of the cabal. You're not going to 100% know what it is, but it's very clear that that's happening for people who have eyes to see, at least. Okay. What I also found funny, I didn't even notice this until recently. When you spell Utah backwards, like reverse spelling, it comes out to hate you. That's just strange because a lot of weird things are happening in Utah. And I just, I don't know, for some reason I was reading it in reverse recently and I was like, oh, wow, hate you. That kind of summarizes up Utah and everything that goes with Utah. There was something about Max Spears, and I want to talk about this in a different video, but I actually think Max Spears is still alive. I'm not sure his death is really true the way it is. When you're trying to read on it, it's very hard to read on it, but I actually pulled some cards in addition to reading on it and also using my body as a pendulum on it. And I got that he might actually not be dead. It could very well be that he's in one of these. Well, it's not like a witness protection program, but whatever the cabal has, the similar thing that they have for it, so that a person can just disappear and reappear somewhere else. But I feel he's actually still alive. Just putting that out there, in addition to, all the soul trappers being like, oh yeah, he was a great guy. But he actually, no, first of all, he's controlled by the cabal. And also he was deceptive, similar to Jordan Sather. And he might actually not be dead. He might very well still be alive. But I'm going to try to read on that in the coming weeks. I'm not going to say when, because they're going to target you even more when you say when and how and whatever. The Vatican complex looks like a key if you look at it from above. So that's always interesting when a person comments that, because I keep forgetting it. For some reason, I keep forgetting that, yeah, that's actually what it looks like. Okay, so if anyone has anything that they want to discuss in the upcoming moments, I know we're already like 47 minutes in or whatever. If you want to say something about the numerology or say something about what you've experienced in your life, please do so. I'm getting a lot of comments on the Lisa Renee community and Lisa Renee in general. And I think I'm going to make a future video on it. Once again, not going to say when, because you're targeted the most when you say when, but at one point in the future, on more insight that I've gotten. And this was more the insight that I got over the past year, because I was working on a lot of people who were part of her community, and some actually remained part of her community, which I don't know why, and who had a whole bunch of stuff around their energy. So this is more when I was doing the shamanic healings and removals. They had a whole bunch of stuff around their energy field. They were wrapped in cocoon-like structures, meaning their psychic insight and intuition was very much dimmed down and very much cut off from their own true intuition, from their own true insight, like their inner self in that sense, right? And so with the Lisa Renee community, that is still an issue. But like I said, I might make just a separate video on it because it's a bit more expansive. And I don't really like the first video that I made because it's a little bit longer ago, but I think it's time for an update. Let's put it that way. Okay, so I'm going to take a glass of water. A sip of water. So irritating, like when you can't see your chat. It's the strangest thing ever. Okay, so hey to everyone who's joining in right now. Okay, anyhow, what else can we talk about? Or what else do you guys want to talk about? Is the world turning us more robotic? I think so. I feel there's something, I'm looking at my screen down here. I feel there's something, they're messing the settings up somehow. It's kind of irritating. Like I keep having to exit out of the screen to actually see anything. Hopefully it records in a good sound quality so you don't have to take it down. Is the population getting out of control? Have you guys seen reels from India recently? Because I saw this one where people were standing on this train platform, and you never know if it's propaganda or not, but basically the video was about how the population is getting more and more out of control over there. So if you want to comment on that because you're from that area, you could. Okay, so right, 15 minutes in. Yeah, I mean, if you guys want to talk about something, please do. If you're getting the message. Um, okay. Pull my notes from here. Okay, so I came across, I don't know how you pronounce this, but it's Antioch or Antioch. It's a Greek town where the first Christians came about, and you have all of these replications of towns. You have Palestine in Ohio, which is not where the real Palestine is, but they're replicating a lot of things that were like more in the ancient world, including ancient Greece, and they're pulling it over to this new world. And so there's at least one town that's the same. It's somewhere in California. They're also doing similar in Australia and New Zealand. So Australia in particular has a lot of towns that are called, or not a lot, but I did see at least one or two when I was over there that have some sort of Avalon connotation. So there's this one town, I think it's in the Blue Mountains, that is called Avalon by the Sea or Avalon at the Sea or something like that. And then when you move further up the coast from Sydney, from Cairns to Sydney and other way around, there's a few Avalon names over there too. So it doesn't mean when this happens that the original Avalon was over there or the original Antioch was over there or the original Palestine was over there, because a lot of people keep confusing this. And it is quite confusing for people who, I don't want to say who lack the discernment, but people who are following a lot of these truther things, like a lot of these Tartarian channels, a lot of these others who just make it seem like it's so easy, right? Oh yeah, of course the Grand Canyon had the original pyramids. Of course, here's where ancient Egypt, all this. No. So I read on this like a few years ago already, but basically, no, that's not true. What they're doing is they're trying to replicate those areas onto the newer continents being Canada, the US specifically, and then also Australia and New Zealand, because those are newer. It's not saying there was no older culture there, but if you look at New Zealand in particular and the Maori, and that's always a hot one because, yeah, I'm not going to roll my eyes, but yeah, I mean, of course, every culture has the right to be preserved, right? The Native Americans here, even though they're not really native, because there were the Vikings before, and there were other people before the Native Americans that used to be called the Indians here. Even though they're not really, of course, they do not deserve to be mistreated, to be slaughtered the way that they were slaughtered, especially on the Trail of Tears, those type of things. But you do have to keep in mind, a lot of them were at war with each other too. Like the Navajo were usually the more peaceful ones, whereas you had which one was it? The one that was in Colorado. I forgot which tribe that was called, like not Cherokee, but something else. Whereas those would be the ones that were more combative, and they were actually having a go at each other too. So it's not like the war energy that you find in this country comes out of nowhere. The Civil War happened on grounds where hundreds of years before that, the Native Americans were at war with each other, just to give you an idea. And so it's similar, like Australia has this entire prison continent energy, which I felt very strongly when I was there for 6 months. And it literally was so prevalent in my reality where I know in certain areas, not in all areas, but in certain areas on the East Coast, I felt very much trapped. And I feel that really has to do with the fact that they were trying to make it this huge outdoor prison for people who came from Europe, stole a loaf of bread or whatever, like we all know that's the history of it. Now, with New Zealand and the Maori, if you actually look at Notre Dame is older than the entire Maori ever are. So, of course, every culture deserves to be respected and appreciated, and no, nothing bad should ever happen. Absolutely not. That's just atrocious. But we're trying to sweep what we have in the old world, which is mostly around Europe, under the rug for cultures like that aren't even as old. Let's put it that way. And so it's similar to all the treasures that you find in what used to be ancient Babylon, which is around Iraq, parts of Iran, maybe, I don't know if it's Pakistan, but whatever else is around there. And then, Egypt obviously has been completely rebuilt because the pyramids that you have there are not the original pyramids at all, but it still holds a little bit of that ancient energy. But a lot of New Agers just get all confused by it anyhow. And so if you really just tap into the energy of it, Egypt has more of that con man energy. And that's also why I personally hate it, because it does not go well with my own ideals. Let's put it that way. But it's just kind of like Egypt is like the wild, wild west of the Middle East. Just like Texas is like the wild, wild west of America, Egypt is the wild, wild west of the Middle East. And I feel a lot of people saw that from 2020 and on, where it didn't have any type of mandates, or the amount of mandates that it had, people were just not adhering to it. Almost no one wore a mask, no one really washed their hands, those type of things. And I just know that because I have Egyptian friends and everything. But with the entire, the Grand Canyon actually houses the real pyramids. No, so it was just rebuilt in a form or another. And then because of this entire mud flood energy, a lot of it is just confusing because you're trying to get a read on it, but it's so hard to read on it because this is where a lot of the erasing of history is happening, and it's all muddling up. But in short, the original spots are still very much in the Middle East. It's just that they were trying to rebuild it here. That's why a lot of towns are also called according to those names. Like you have like the Palestine in Ohio, the Antioch in California, and possibly also other areas. I think there's more than one Antioch or Antioch. The Iroquois, yeah, it could have been the Iroquois in Colorado. I don't know, whatever tribe was in Colorado, because I know for sure I had past lives with the Navajo. The Navajo always recognize me whenever I'm in Navajo country, which is New Mexico and Arizona. I remember it so clearly. This is the last time I was there, that I actually had this like aha experience. I was driving from Flagstaff, or like from that stretch that goes kind of like through nothing. There's like a reservation, Navajo reservation, to Flagstaff. And because here in New York, you don't have those type of reservations. So whenever I am on a reservation, I don't know how to really act. I'm not 100% sure if I'm not allowed to buy anything there, if I'm not allowed to interact with the people. Like I'm not 100% sure what the reservation thing is in Arizona and New Mexico. Let's put it that way. So usually I try to just drive through it and not really interact with people. But this time I actually had to use the bathroom, and I actually also had to get like a glass, a bottle of water or something, because I had driven for like 9 hours already and I was coming from Utah down. So I stopped on this reservation that is around I want to say it's like 2 hours from Flagstaff, like kind of up north. And it was a Navajo one. Like pretty regular, it had like these lamps, like the traffic lights, everything, it's really regular. And for some reason, I stopped in this store that was selling like certain type of ring. Like I was just looking at their rings. One had like this turquoise ring, really beautiful. But wherever I was just going, the Navajo were just extreme. Like they're always extremely friendly to me, like more friendly than any other white person in that sense. And I know for a fact it's because I have that energetic, the past life connection, everything to them. And so I had that reservation experience where they were not rude, or like I've seen them rude to other people. Let's put it that way. They're never rude to me. They never have an issue with me. And then the moment I hit Flagstaff, which is right above Sedona, kind of above, yeah, I guess it's above Sedona in Arizona. I entered this one restaurant, and there's this family of Navajo, which I found out afterwards. But it's this family of Navajo that were waiting for a table, and I was waiting for a table. And this one guy just turns around and starts this full-blown conversation. Like we were talking for like 15 minutes for absolutely no reason other than him probably just picking up on my energy and liking my energy somehow. And then it just turns out that he explained the entire reservation thing to me. Because it was like, oh, you were driving through the Navajo reservation and blah, blah, blah. And that's unusual that you had those type of experiences and everything. Usually they're more reserved. I think he was also a bit surprised. But I tell you one thing, because I've been in Colorado 3 times already. Whenever I hit that Colorado state border, and whenever I hit that country that belongs to a different tribe, and I looked this up because I needed to find an explanation for it, people are extremely combative towards me, are rude to me. Like I was literally walking into this grocery store, just ordering a sandwich. I was speaking up. I don't have an issue raising my voice and speaking up. This woman, for the heck of it, did not want, she was a white person. She wasn't like a Native American. For the heck of it, did not want to understand my order, was basically yelling at me in front of the entire store for no reason. Like she was extremely rude. There's absolutely no other explanation for her being so rude. And I almost like walked out of the store being like, I don't even want to purchase from you anymore. But for some reason I stuck it out. And so when I looked up, because I knew, because my Native American imprint over there from the past lives is so strong in that area, like extremely strong. And I'm always drawn to those areas. I love the New Mexico, the Arizona, like all of those where you have that entire Native thing. And every time I come back, people are always like, you just look very different. So whenever you just refresh yourself in that energy, let's put it that way. And I knew for a fact, because I had just had the Navajo interaction like before that or something. I knew for a fact this had to do with some weird Native American past life rivalry. And I looked it up, and whatever tribe was in charge of that area enslaved the Navajos, mistreated the Navajos, and were really mean to the Navajos. I knew that this woman was probably an incarnation of whoever tribe was in there, and she was taking it out on me because I had that very strong Navajo energy. And so that's just how it works, by the way. That's just how, when you're in tribal land, when you're in Native American land, even when you're like Australia, Aboriginal land, New Zealand, like that type of thing. When you're in that very tribal energy, that's how it would work if you have that past life connection. Let's put it that way. So for me, that's very strong in like the Southwest of the US, just as an example. And for me, Colorado is never going to be an option to really live in or to move to, or even really, I don't even like visiting Colorado that much, even though there are lovely areas. It has a beautiful landscape, just because, they enslaved the Navajos. Like they were at war with the tribe that I energetically most attached to, or have that energetic imprint in, if that makes sense. So on the other hand, visiting Joshua Tree, visiting like Tucson, Arizona, Sedona, Arizona, not so much Phoenix. I don't love Phoenix. Visiting parts of New Mexico, it's okay because, there's a stronger imprint of that purpose there. Whether or not I would want to move there is a different question, but it's always lovely to visit those areas. Utah doesn't really work that well for me either. It depends on where in Utah. Utah has an interesting energy too. Let me go through the comments right here. It's just so distracting. Like for people who are just tuning in right now, I can't really see the comments on my screen up here, so I have to go through them down here. I felt in Santa Fe, New Mexico when I was 14, Pueblo. Oh yeah, Santa Fe is really lovely. I like Santa Fe. I don't think I could live in Santa Fe, but Santa Fe is really, really lovely. I liked Santa Fe. The last time I was there was 2018. The land of enchantments, New Mexico. Yeah, Albuquerque has a weirdly really weird, quirky, chaotic energy though, and Santa Fe has a much nicer energy. Also, there's a spiritual triangle. So for people who didn't know this, I found this out in 2018. When you go from Sedona to Santa Fe to Boulder, it kind of triangles out somehow. If you look at it on a map, that is actually considered a spiritual triangle. And also by a lot of witches know about this because I actually came across a witch. That's the one Airbnb witch I talk about in my witchcraft video. And she was telling me, oh, you're doing the spiritual triangle. And I'm like, oh, I had no idea this was a spiritual triangle, but I'm just doing this based on my own intuition. So supposedly it's a spiritual triangle that some sorcerers and witches know about. But yeah, I did it. And it was like back in 2018. It was like 2018 was another pivotal year for me. So it was like the very spiritual year. So yeah. Okay, wait. So what did I want to wait? That was kind of leading into what was I actually talking about? Right. Okay. So tribal energy. But okay, so the reason, even if the tribal energy isn't as strong, like it's younger than we think it is, like it's not as old as we're made to believe. Like the Viking history and the history that came before that is actually much older. And then obviously certain types of European hotspots like Notre Dame came before the Maori came. But yet here we are trying to protect the Maori culture and not protecting our own treasures that we have in the old world, meaning in Europe, just as an example. So even though it's younger, the reason that it's more not empowering, but the more overpowering and the more powerful in certain areas is because they work more with, I don't want to call it magic or witchcraft or whatever, but they work more with those type of rituals and practices that ground them more into the energy of the land. And you can feel that in certain areas too. A lot of along what we have here is more like the Appalachian or Appalachian tribe that used to be here. A lot of that, unfortunately, has been destroyed to a certain extent. But if you go to certain areas outside of a city, like whenever I go more towards upstate New York, and you go into like more of a foresty area, you feel that way more too. So they've put their energy imprint onto the land through the practices and rituals that they do. And that's also possibly how they did it in New Zealand and Australia and all of those areas too. And that's why it feels like it's older. It feels like it's more ancient, but they've just worked with the natural elements to a different degree than the people that came after them, if that makes sense. And that's why we're getting the impression that we have to always protect that or do this and that. And there's more stories that go into that, obviously. But yeah, I think that's a good summary. Let me just check how far we're in of everything so far. And I hope you're having a lovely start to your year. So I see there's quite a few people in the chat. Maybe you can like this video if you want to. And yeah, I mean, if you have anything else to add, just add it. But I think otherwise, we're going to keep this on the shorter side and just say this is the numerology of 2025, some future predictions on a worldly level, a little bit of tribal background or tribal history. Now, once again, I'm not coming from a disrespectful standpoint. I'm just coming from a very critical standpoint of you have to question everything that's being thrown at us, including the tribal, we have to protect everything, when in reality, there's more that goes behind it, right? I mean, it's not always rainbows and butterflies with the tribal nations either. And I know a lot of people could, when I talk about the entire, like people tattooing stuff, like some of these tribal things, tattooing stuff on their faces, that is because they went to war. The only thing they, like the Maori in particular, but also some here in the US, the only thing they're tattooing that on their, or used to tattoo it, not anymore, obviously, but used to tattoo it on their face is because they went to war. They weren't a peaceful tribe. And so you have to realize that too. I mean, I don't even want to go as far and say they were cannibals. Like my one friend, she actually says the Maori were cannibals and then they were overtaken by the Westerners. And that's like a more peaceful scenario than having cannibals against cannibals. Like, I don't even want to go that far, but I do understand her viewpoint too. Okay. But tattooing tribal stuff on your face, the background of that, to be real, is that this was a war tactic. This wasn't like a peaceful tribe. And so if you look at it from that background, Yeah, but I mean, obviously, it's not necessarily anymore because right now the world is very different than it was 100 years ago, 200 years ago, all of those things. Okay, you guys. I hope, yeah, I hope this was a good mix for you to dig through in the next few days. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for your support and everything. And 2025 is going to be a powerful year. It's obviously going to be different for each and every one of you. So I would actually suggest you look up where Mars falls into your chart and see how could this could play out, how this could impact you. You know, if your Mars is in the 12th house, this might be a little bit more of a difficult energy to play to combat with or to encounter if your Mars is in Aries. If you have a Mars in Aries person, not necessarily even in this chat, but when you see this later on, I want to know because I really want to know how this energy is going to play out for you in the year ahead. If it's going to be very difficult, if it's going to be more confrontations, if it's going to be more of that fiery, productive, marching forward energy, or what exactly is happening. And also for Aries in general, you know, if you are an Aries or you have an Aries in the rising or moon, this could also be a very, very interesting energy because you are already pretty much governed by Mars, and so you having like this double, triple, um, yeah, like just energy, right? Like the numerology and everything that goes into it too. And then of course for 9 people, this could very well be your year as well. But too short. I didn't want to like. I hope the predictions didn't come over as doom and gloom. It's just that there's a positive energy to it. And if you're joining later and you haven't seen them yet, the first 20 to 30 minutes are all about the numerology. It's more like there's a more positive connotation to a number and a more negative. And so you're always trying to balance them out. Let's put it that way. And we saw very well how that played out in last year. You know, for some people, last year was amazing and was great. And I wouldn't be surprised if this was the people who were very much influenced by Saturn in their own chart already, or who perhaps were not necessarily going through their Saturn return. That could have been a very difficult year, or who just have some connotation or some deeper meaning with the number of 8. Let's put it that way. But until then, you know, we're obviously going to move through this year all together. Until then, I hope you have a wonderful start, a fresh start. You know, if people are joining a gym, this is probably going to happen more in this year. I would assume it's going to happen more like the body, physical activity. You know, whenever I'm close to my own personal Mars line, which I was quite a few times over the past 2 years, I always feel like I need to go more hiking than usual. I always feel I have to do more physical activity. I tend to lose weight, which is not my goal because I actually have to gain weight. But I tend to actually lose weight whenever I'm close to my Mars line. And this is more according to astrocartography, but the energy is similar. I tend to be more proactive, you know, kind of like not necessarily be more combative with people, but definitely speak my mind more. Let's put it that way. Sometimes people do confront me more when I'm closer to that Mars energy. And my Mars is not like I don't have a Mars in Aries at all. Like I already said, my Mars is more in Cancer, so it's not like as negative as some people like to say. It's actually for me it works quite well. But my point is, I don't have like a major Mars placement other than that anywhere in my chart, and so for me, it kind of plays out in just being more physically active. And so people could be experiencing a lot of that in the year ahead too. Meaning, if your New Year's resolution is being more physically active, this would be the year where you could actually stick it through. So I wouldn't be surprised if more people than usual join gyms, sign up to gyms, or do anything like that. Or if you're trying to run a marathon, a triathlon, anything major, you know, anything like really something that you set your mind to do. This could be a really nice energy to work with, especially if you are an air and a fire sign, because it's going to be more productive for you. If you're like more in that earth and water energy, it's more about being relaxed or feeling more tired as well. But basically, this energy ahead, you know, seeing it from a more positive standpoint, it could be more beneficial in that, you know, and physical activity could be a huge one for some people. So I think that's a huge pro. But Mars and Gemini, Aries rising, Mars in third house. Oh, Mars and Gemini, and in third house. Well, so yeah, thanks for sharing. um, okay, well, have a lovely one, and see you all very soon again. And of course, you can always comment below if you have anything to add. I will talk to you very soon again. I have a huge list. I'm going to show you the list of things that I have. So just look at this here. I have 2 pages. I think that's like up to 15 video topics at this point that for sure I'm going to record because they're already written out and I already wrote notes to them. And then obviously I have like my huge list of notes that I want to write. And I feel with every video that I make, there's a new comment that adds that could probably have a video on it in and of itself. But just to give an idea, like for me, it definitely feels more like a proactive year so far, which is nice and which is good. So yeah, okay, you guys have a lovely one. Talk to you very soon again and enjoy your nights, enjoy your day if you're just starting off. And until then, bye.